am 97 years old, and it took me until I was somewhere past 80 to learn the one thing that would have saved me from most of the suffering I caused myself. Not the suffering life caused me. I'm talking about the suffering I caused myself. There's a difference, and most people never bother to figure out which is which. I'm going to tell you what nobody told me. Not my father, not my preacher, not a single book I ever read in 97 years of living on this earth. And my father was a smart man, my preacher was a good man, the books were fine, but not one of them told me this plainly, and I am going to tell it to you plain, because plain is all I have left at this point, and honestly, it's the only thing that ever worked anyway. I've farmed this Kansas land for over 50 years. I ran a hardware store my father built with his own hands for 52 years. I married Margaret Louise Hendricks in June of 1947, and I was with her for 54 years until pneumonia took her in the winter of 2001. I buried my son Dale in 1987. He was 31 years old. I buried my best friend Herschel. I buried my brother Virgil. I sold the farm in 2013, and that about finished me for a little while, because some losses are made of land and not of people, and they hurt in a different way, but they hurt just the same. I have had a long time to think about what I did wrong. And what I did wrong was one thing, really. One thing with about a dozen faces on it. And I'm going to show you every one of those faces before we're done here today. I am not a complicated man. I want you to understand that before you decide whether anything I say is worth your time. I grew up on a farm outside Abilene, Kansas, the second of 4 boys. My father got up before the sun every day of his life, and he went to bed after it, and he never once complained about that arrangement. We didn't have much. We had enough. There's a distance between those two things that people who grew up with enough sometimes don't appreciate, but we knew that distance well, and it taught us something. I took over the hardware store from my father in 1959. I was 29 years old, and I thought I understood how things worked, how business worked, how farming worked, how marriage worked, how life worked. I had watched my father do all of it, and I figured I had absorbed enough by watching to manage just fine on my own. That assumption right there, that I had absorbed enough by watching, is where most of my mistakes began. The specific moment I trace it all back to is a Saturday morning in April of 1963. I was 33 years old. Margaret had asked me to come with her to her sister Ruth's house for a birthday dinner that evening. I had invoices to sort. I stayed behind. I told her I'd be there by 7. I got there at 9:15, and by the time I walked in the door, the candles had been blown out for 2 hours. And Margaret was sitting with her coffee in a way I recognized as disappointment she had given up expressing. I did that more times than I can count in 54 years of marriage. I thought being present meant being in the house. It took me much longer than it should have to understand that being present means being actually, deliberately, consciously there. Not just physically located somewhere nearby. That is where this story starts. Here is the thing I cannot say without pausing first. I was a man who fixed things for a living. 52 years in a hardware store. People brought me their broken things, and I figured out how to repair them, or I found the part they needed, or I told them straight when something couldn't be fixed. I was good at it. I was methodical. I was patient with broken objects in a way I was not always patient with people. and for a long time I did not notice that discrepancy. And here is the paradox that I have to live with. I spent my whole life believing that hard work was the answer to everything. Work the land hard enough, it produces. Work the store hard enough, it succeeds. Work at anything hard enough, it comes right. That was the Kansas farming philosophy, and I inherited it completely, and I applied it to everything. My business, my farm, my marriage, my fatherhood, my friendships, everything, and it worked for the land, it worked for the store. And it quietly, slowly did real damage to everything else. Because the things that matter most in a life are not fixed by working harder. They are not fixed by effort and invoices and early mornings and methodical persistence. They are maintained by attention, by presence, by saying the thing before the moment passes, by stopping what you are doing and actually looking at the person standing in front of you. I was a hard worker my whole life. And the hardest lesson I ever learned is that hard work is not the same thing as being there. And being there is the only thing that at the end actually counts. I knew this by the time I was in my 80s. I wish I had known it at 33, standing in my hardware store sorting invoices while my wife drove to her sister's house alone. I cannot go back. But you are still in the part of your life where you can go forward differently. So let me tell you what I learned. The first thing I learned too late is that the people who love you will stop asking eventually. Margaret asked me for years to slow down, to take a Sunday off, to come to bed at a reasonable hour instead of sitting at the kitchen table with the farm ledgers until 11 at night. She asked in the way that a patient, good-natured woman asks, not demanding, not dramatic, just asking, year after year. And I heard her every time, I want you to know that. I was not a man who didn't listen. I listened and I nodded and I said, you're right. And I went right back to the ledgers. Because the work was there and it needed doing, and I told myself that providing for the family was itself a form of love, which it is, but it is not the only form. And it cannot substitute for the other forms, and I used it as a substitute for 20 years. In 1978, Margaret stopped asking, not with a fight, not with an ultimatum, she just stopped. She made her peace with who I was, and she built her own life inside of our life together, and she was fine, I think. She was genuinely fine. But something between us settled into a shape that was smaller than what it could have been. And it stayed that shape for the rest of our marriage. The people who love you will stop asking, not because they stopped loving you, because they got tired and made their peace and found another way to manage, and you will not notice the moment it happens. You will only notice it years later in a quiet room when you realize the asking stopped a long time ago and you never even marked the day. Whatever someone in your life is asking you for right now, and you know exactly what it is you have known for a while, do not wait until they stop asking. The asking is the gift. The asking means they still believe you might change. When they stop, they have answered their own question, and that answer will be with both of you for a long time. The second thing I learned too late is that being right is one of the most expensive hobbies a person can have. Herschel, my business partner and closest friend for 41 years, and I had a falling out in 1991 over how to handle a supplier who had shorted us on an order. The amount in dispute was somewhere around $400. I was right about it. Factually, contractually, completely right. I knew it, and Herschel knew it, and the supplier probably knew it too. But I handled being right in a way that made Herschel feel like I was handling him, like I was managing him rather than talking to him. And instead of saying that, he went quiet in the way that men of our generation go quiet when something has gone wrong that they don't know how to name. We were never quite the same after that. We were still friends. We still worked together until he died in 1995, but something had shifted, and neither of us said a word about it, and then he was gone, and I never got to say, "Herschel, I was so busy being right that I forgot to be decent about it, and I'm sorry." Being right cost me 4 years of full friendship with the best friend I ever had, and then it cost me the chance to ever repair it. You are in an argument right now, or you recently were, where being right is costing you more than winning is worth. You know which one it is. The question is whether you are going to let it run its full expensive course before you admit it, or whether you are going to be smarter than I was. The third thing I learned too late is that the words your children need to hear from you have an expiration date. I was not an affectionate father by the standards of any generation, including my own. My father had not been affectionate either. We showed love by showing up, by working, by providing. It was a language our family spoke fluently, and I thought it was sufficient. Dale, my son, who I lost in 1987, Dale knew I loved him. I am certain of that. He knew the way you know something that was never said out loud but was demonstrated 10,000 times in actions. He knew. But I never told him. Not directly, not with words. Not once in 31 years did I look at my son and say, "Dale, I am proud of you." Not because I wasn't proud. I was enormously, constantly. But because saying it felt unnecessary, and also, if I am being truthful, a little uncomfortable in a way I never examined closely enough. The tractor accident happened on a Wednesday morning in September of 1987. He was gone before the ambulance got there. I have had 37 years to wish I had said it. Simple words. "I'm proud of you, son." 6 words. I had 31 years, and I could not find 6 words. Think about who in your life is waiting to hear the thing you have never said. Your child, your parent, your brother, someone who has been providing evidence for years, patient evidence that they would like to hear the words, not just infer them from the actions. Say it out loud today if you can, before a Wednesday morning in September makes the decision for you. The fourth thing I learned too late is that rest is not weakness and silence is not the same as peace. I worked because I was afraid of what I would find if I stopped. I did not know that at the time. I thought I worked because the work needed doing and because idle hands and so on. But somewhere in my 70s, sitting still finally stopped feeling like failure. And in that stillness, I started to hear things I had been drowning out with busyness for 50 years. I heard how tired I was. I heard how much I had missed. I heard Margaret's voice in the quiet of the house in a way I had never really heard it when she was alive, and I was always halfway somewhere else in my mind. The silence I had avoided my whole life turned out to be where everything real had been waiting. You are busy right now. You are filling the hours with the noise of productivity and necessity and one more thing that needs handling. I am not telling you the work isn't real. I am telling you that the silence is also real, and it contains things that the work is covering up, and at some point you need to let those things be heard. Better to hear them now while you can do something about them than later in a house full of quiet that arrived too late to be useful. The fifth thing, the one that took me longest, the one I did not fully understand until I was past 80, is this. The life you are waiting to start is already happening. I spent decades treating my actual daily life as the obstacle between me and the real life I was building toward. The farm was the means. The store was the means. The hard work and the long hours and the putting things off were all in service of some later, better, more complete version of living that was going to arrive once things settled down. Things never settled down. The later never came, or rather, the later came and it looked exactly like the present had always looked, except that Margaret was gone, and Dale was gone, and Herschel was gone, and Virgil was gone, and I was standing in a hardware store that I was about to sell, and the future I had been working toward had somehow become the past without ever becoming the present. The life is now, this Tuesday, this ordinary conversation, this unremarkable meal, this person sitting across from you who will not always be sitting there. This is the life, not the preparation for it, not the funding of it, the thing itself. I was 97 years in the learning of that. You do not have to be. Let me stop and talk to you straight for a minute. I know what you are doing right now. You are watching an old man talk, and you are thinking about your uncle or your father-in-law or that neighbor down the road who never seemed to slow down. You are applying this to someone else's life with great accuracy and insight. You are not applying it to your own. I see it because I did the same thing my whole life. I could diagnose everyone around me with tremendous precision. Herschel was too proud. My brother Virgil worried too much about money. Margaret's father never told his children he loved them. I could see all of it clearly from the outside. My own version of every one of those things ran right alongside me for 50 years, and I barely glanced at it. So let me be specific about you. You have something you've been putting off that has a person attached to it, not a task. A person, someone who is waiting patiently or not so patiently for you to show up in a way you haven't been showing up. Someone who asked you for something a while back, time, words, presence, acknowledgement, and who got a version of soon that has been aging ever since. That person is somewhere right now, maybe in the next room, maybe in a house 40 minutes away that you keep meaning to drive to. Maybe they are older than you are comfortable thinking about, and the window is smaller than you have been allowing yourself to know. You know who it is. You have known since the first 5 minutes of this. Go to them, not this weekend. Today if you can, tomorrow at the very latest, I'll be dead before long. That's not a complaint, just an accounting. At 97, you get to be matter-of-fact about these things in a way that I find honestly more comfortable than the alternative. What I think about in the quiet of the mornings is not my own end. It is the people in your life who are closer to theirs than either of you are admitting. Your parents, if they are still here. Your older friends. The people who were there at the beginning of your story and who are in their final chapters now, chapters that are moving faster than the earlier ones did. The time you have left with those people is not infinite. It is not even as large as it appears from where you are standing. I know this because I have been on both sides of it, the one with plenty of time and the one without, and the distance between them is shorter than anyone warns you about. Don't use the time you have left on the things that won't matter. The argument, the grudge, the invoice that can wait, the Sunday you could have taken off. Use it on the people. Just the people. That's all there ever was anyway. Here is what I want you to do. Today, not eventually, today, go to the person this made you think about. Drive there or call them or walk into the next room and say the thing out loud that you have been carrying around unsaid. You know what it is? You've known for a while. Say it with their name. Say it looking at them. This week, take one thing off your list that is not a person, and spend that time with someone who is. Not productively, not with an agenda. Just present, just there, just the two of you in the same place at the same time with nothing more complicated than that. And if you have been hard to reach, if you have been the person in your family or your circle of friends who is always busy, always halfway somewhere else in your head, let one person in this week, all the way in, let them see the full version of you, not the managed one. I ran a hardware store for 52 years. We had a sign above the door that my father put up when he built the place and that I never took down. It said, "The right tool used right at the right time." He meant it about tools. But I think about it now in a different way. The right words, said right, before the right time runs out. Don't wait until you're 97 to understand what the right time was.